Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Friday Discovery session. I'm Kelsey Brazil. I'm a project manager here at Efficiency Canada, and I'm your go-to gal if you're interested in learning about our Discovery Hub, which you can hop on to anytime you'd like. I'll share a link afterwards. I'd like to acknowledge that Efficiency Canada operates within Carleton University, and our campuses are located on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. I myself am calling from Mi'kma'ki. Before we get started, just a reminder to everyone that our guest speaker will speak for about 20 minutes, and then we'll open the floor to questions. So please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or you can wait to the end. You can raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question directly. We do have a hard stop at 12:45 Eastern time so that everybody can finish their lunch, their breakfast, snacks, whatever you're doing based on where you are in the world. So thank you for coming, and I'm pleased to welcome our guest today, Samantha Caputo, who's a manager of regulatory affairs and market development at Oracle Utilities. And today she's going to do a deep dive on the power of the utility customer in decarbonization. So I hope you enjoy, and please join me in welcoming Samantha.
Great, thank you. I'm really excited to be here today, and I'm calling in from the Boston area in Massachusetts. And just a little bit about myself before I dive into the presentation today. I have a background in building decarbonization public policy. So before joining OPower, which is a part of Oracle Utilities, I was working for a regional energy efficiency organization in the United States that covered the Northeast, and that was Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships. And there, as I said, I was focusing on building decarbonization public policy work. And I've been with OPower now on the regulatory affairs and market development team for just about a year and a half, and really focused on the New England region in the United States and then Canada. And Canada has been a new area for me to focus on, and it's been really exciting and interesting to learn about all the ways that the different provinces enact energy efficiency policies and programs. So it's great to have this introduction to all the members of Efficiency Canada and get the opportunity to talk to you about some of the things that OPower has been up to recently. So with that, I'll dive on in. So to start us off, I know decarbonization, I feel like, is the buzzword of the industry of late, and it really is looking at reducing our carbon emissions, going towards a zero carbon economy across the globe. And when we think about that, I mean, it's a massive challenge that we have ahead of us. It takes full, restructuring of how our energy supply infrastructure and system works. And so thinking about that, we want to understand, how does the customer play a role in that? So you have a lot of policy and a lot of action that's been going on the supply side, right? We need to convert to renewable energy, make sure our supply is green. But then on the demand side, what can we do there, right? And I feel like that has been where a lot of our focus has been as an organization, is looking at the demand side and what can customers do? What can utility customers themselves do to help within this transition? And how can we engage them to be participants in this transition? And so when thinking about decarbonization and the role of energy efficiency, the role of the customer, really, we think about it in two particular assets, right? We have structural energy efficiencies, tends to be how we refer to it. And that's the type of energy efficiency that typically starts with like a home energy audit. You have someone coming into your house that's telling you, which appliances may need upgrading, looking at your lighting, looking at the actual structure of the home, may present some retrofit weatherization opportunity for you to improve the efficiency of your building. And then we have the behavioral side of it, which is where OPower really thrives. And that is looking at how can we use behavior science, how can we actually influence the way a customer interacts with energy within their home and the way that they use it. And so when looking at this transition towards decarbonization and the actions that we can take, we really wanted to understand, what is the role of behavior? How does that fit in within structural programs, and how can it work alongside that? So we actually worked with the Analysis Group, which is a company based out of Boston, to help us quantify that. So as a first of its kind research, it was done in 2020, that was looking at those behavioral programs and those structural programs to look at the avoided climate damages of them. So when do those avoided climate damages happen? What's the value of them? And what's the opportunity to leverage both of them? And so some of the key findings that came out of this research were that behavioral programs can cost effectively reduce greenhouse gas emissions at scale very rapidly. So the unique opportunity with behavior is that it's typically structured as an opt-out program. So you have your treatment and control groups, and your treatment groups are the customers that are getting those behavioral interventions, whether it be a home energy report, behavioral demand response, different rate interactions, etc. They're getting that. And then you have a control group that does not, a smaller group that does not receive it, and you can measure the actual savings that way. So we found that behavior scales rapidly because of that design. It can reach a lot of customers right away through that randomized control trial setup. But then we also found that behavioral and structural programs can really complement each other, because we need to retrofit and make sure our building stock is energy efficient, that they are comfortable and healthy places for us to live, and that's critical in this transition. So really having both programs complement each other and work alongside each other. They shouldn't work in isolation, we find. Using behavior can also help uplift those customers to engage in weatherization and other energy efficiency programs. And so one of the case studies from the report was National Grid, which is a utility in New England, in the United States, as well as New York. And this looked at the structural scenario. And in this report, that was very focused on kind of like a whole home retrofit. So like the big structural upgrades that you need to do in your home, and then looking at the behavioral scenario. And what you see is that structural scenario has lifetime avoided climate damages that will continue to see benefits over a long period of time. The behavioral scenario sees those avoided climate damages at scale in that year that they're applied. So typically behavior has a 1-year measure life or useful energy life associated with it. And so they really have like unique opportunities in the avoided climate damages. And this is why we say that they should really complement and work together, because at scale, behavior can help avoid a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And by continuing to reapply that intervention over each year, you can continue to drive that scale forward. And then on the structural side, we're seeing a lifetime worth of avoided emissions, but the participation up front might be smaller, might not reach as many people. So you get the complement of the two together. And so we were really excited about this research and really thought it gave a lot of opportunities to have that conversation of leveraging behavior alongside other energy efficiency programs when having the decarbonization conversation within our energy efficiency world. And so to drive that forward, we're like, okay, we have this research now. What can we do with it? How can we drive its impact in action? And so one thing that we were able to do this past fall, which was really exciting, is work with the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissions, NARUC, and get them to adopt a resolution. So for them, these resolutions are typically put forward by a utility commissioner within a committee, and then that committee will adopt it. And so we were able to get language looking at energy efficiency in achieving cost-effective decarbonization to encourage states and their commissions to leverage those utility relationships that exist with their customers to implement energy efficiency programs to maximize benefits. So it's kind of a high-level language that's included there, but using that language to have that conversation of using behavior alongside structural programs can really maximize your impact, because you have that short-term impact of avoided climate damages with that behavioral intervention, meeting a lot of customers, regardless of their income, regardless of their housing type, location, city versus rural. You can reach all of those customers. And then combining that again with those structural programs that can sometimes take longer to scale. And so building off this, we worked with the Brattle Group to really look at, okay, what is the customer pathway in decarbonization? We know that behavior and structural programs alongside each other can really help drive decarbonization, but what does that look like in practice, and what is the actual potential? So we worked with the Brattle Group to have them quantify that for us. And one of the key findings was that by 2040, utility customers can be twice as impactful than current energy supply policies that exist today. And so how we came to that conclusion, or how really the Brattle Group came to that conclusion, they used some of their proprietary modeling to come to these outcomes, was they looked at the customer pathway, which includes the residential sector alone. And within the residential sector, it included electric and gas energy efficiency, behind the meter solar, electric vehicles, and then building electrification, so your heating and water electrification. And so that was the sector, those were the tools in the residential sector that were analyzed in their modeling to look at what is the potential. And again, we did this because we know that there's a lot driving forward the clean energy supply, but how can we quantify that customer side of things to help drive those policies and programs forward as well? So this is how you see that breakdown here. And the outcomes were really exciting. I mean, I know in some places there's a lot of attention and focus on strategic electrification, which is a critical tool to drive decarbonization. That sometimes I feel like it's overshadowing the energy efficiency as least cost carbon reduction resource. And this research, the outcomes of it, helps us kind of really bring that back into focus, back into the forefront, because between now and 2030, which is astonishing to me that that's only 8 years away at this point. You tend to think about it as this long-term goal, but really less than a decade at this point. Energy efficiency will be one of the key drivers to reducing emissions and some of the key actions that customers can take. And then by 2040, we're really looking at transportation electrification, with the rising adoption of EVs really driving change in the residential sector as we see more of those come into the market. And then I thought surprising was when you think about building electrification, some of the opportunities there on this graph look pretty small compared to the other resources, but are still going to be a critical component in it. And I think when we think about cold climates, and then also in provinces and areas where fuel oil still may be a factor, there's even more of an opportunity with electrification because you're getting off of those fossil fuels. And I wanted to include this because so the Brattle Group looked at this as an ambitious but achievable forecast. And this table here specifically pulls forward those electrification resources out of that graph. So looking at the electric vehicle, and then space and water heating. And I feel like when you look at that graph on the last slide, the electrification piece did look very small, but when you see what the actual numbers are behind that, you're seeing 24% of demand electrified by 2030. So that's still a significant number. And it's an instance of one of those measures where it's a slower adoption, ensuring that it is cost effective for customers to be able to participate and fuel switch. So there's definitely opportunity there, and all of these resources really driving forward. And so one of the main takeaways for us from this research is that all energy efficiency, electrification, and then really using, for us, demand flexibility as an enabler as well, can drive customer action and reduce emissions 2 times as more than the clean energy supply. And so we really see these three pillars here that you see on your screen: energy efficiency, electrification, and then demand flexibility as key tools and resources where we can drive customer action and the utility customer can participate in decarbonization. And at the forefront of all this, integrated within every resource, we believe that equity and affordability need to be at the forefront. And I think thinking about electrification as an example here, it may not be the affordable solution for all right now to make that change. And I feel like that's one of the reasons that we're seeing it kind of be a slower adoption rate there. And so making sure we're doing this in an equitable way and in a way that ensures energy affordability is critical across all these pillars. And so at O-Power, we really have taken the findings from this research, understanding the market drivers for decarbonization, and used it to help utilities. And so we took all of that, those findings and whatnot, and really assessed our roadmap and where we want to take behavioral energy efficiency within decarbonization to help drive those forward. So we have a range of different types of solutions and technology available to help do that. And I wanted to take the opportunity with you all today to kind of take you through O-Power's roadmap and how we see behavior fitting within those different pillars that you saw on the last screen. So some of the technologies that we have are, the traditional home energy report, right, is the kind of like foundational tool within behavioral energy efficiency. And it has since evolved since then to include behavior demand response, load shaping, rate analysis, and different engagement tools, and education reports as well. And through these different resources, we have really been able to drive results in behavioral energy efficiency. So to date, really exciting. We've had over 30 terawatt hours of energy savings across all of our clients, and also have reduced demand by over 400 megawatts. And so we're seeing significant energy savings. We're looking at that now in the context of carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. How much avoided emissions are we driving? But then we're also seeing how behavior can help get customers, utility customers, to engage within those other pillars, right? Engage in structural energy efficiency programs, electrifying, and then also understanding the flexibility of their demand. So we're seeing faster product and program adoption. We're seeing customers engage digitally, and that is all driving satisfaction amongst utility customers. And so here is another way to look at those pillars, again, with customer action at the forefront. And I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of talk through each of these and just what it means for us. But behind each and every one of these pillars, to really drive behavioral energy efficiency forward, we have to use behavior science. So making sure we understand all the different motivations and how to interact with utility customers, and make sure everything is personalized and targeted towards them to help drive them to action. And we do that alongside artificial intelligence. So our technology is always learning based on how customers interact with the solutions, and is always looking at ways to simplify and personalize, again, those interactions so that we can be successful in helping utilities achieve their decarbonization goals. And one example of that is looking at behavior demand response. And I pulled this forward as an example because I think oftentimes we think people tend to think behavior is the home energy report, which it very much so is. But again, we've built on so much on top of that. And behavioral demand response can really help with that demand flexibility aspect of decarbonization by engaging and nudging customers to reduce their load at peak, or depending on when renewable sources are most available or less available. So bringing all those things together and breaking down those silos is really an opportunity here. And so when you have behavioral energy efficiency and behavior demand response together, you can significantly increase the amount of savings across customers. And so kind of just touching through each of the pillars here. So energy efficiency is at the forefront, right? We know that that is a least cost electric and gas solution. And when looking at it through a behavioral lens, the opportunities that we have are really continuing to improve and increase the experiences that customers have with the home energy report, and continuing to influence them to adopt those cleaner energy solutions. We have the integration of, again, experience automation. So trying to make things happen quicker, have more predictive analytics that can help understand where that customer might go and what might influence their decision. And then also using weekly engagement. And this can include things like high bill alerts. So being able to tell customers, hey, like you're trending towards a higher bill to help avoid customers going into arrears, and then maybe being able to help them avoid such situations. Also rate engagements too are opportunities there. And then demand flexibility is that pillar that really has the opportunity to enable more energy savings. It has the opportunity to enable electrification and whatnot. So here, that's again where we're seeing the behavioral demand response that's trying to shift that load and create savings at peak demand times. We also have scaling device automation and helping customers enroll in those programs. So whether it's a smart thermostat program or others, being able to influence customers to take that action to engage and allow their utility to kind of manage those devices on their behalf to, again, avoid higher peak demand. I think rate education is a big one as more different time of use rates or rate schemes are coming into the market, educating customers, making sure they understand how to engage with that rate, what it means for them, particularly, for instance, like the electric vehicle side. If there are time of use rates for EV charging, whatnot, it's an opportunity for us to engage and help those customers benefit and maximize their opportunity within those situations. The next one is electrification. And again, this is the one that I think a lot of people are talking about right now. It's like the shiny new toy, if you will, within decarbonization. And so how can we use behavior to drive electrification outcomes? I think part of it is helping utilities identify who their EV customers are using disaggregation models. And then once utilities know who their utility customers are, helping them engage with them using either like an EV home energy report or other tools available to them. We're exploring how behavior may help drive the adoption of EVs as well. And that's a newer space for us. And then on the building side, it's how to engage customers to identify whether or not a heat pump might be right for them, and if it'll be cost effective, educating them on what that means, of what a heat pump is, also connecting it to weatherization, making sure that they have a weatherized home to maximize the benefits that heat pumps can provide as well. So I think there is a lot of interaction there and education opportunities available through behavioral programs to help drive electrification goals across utilities. And then again, bringing it back to equity, bringing it back to affordability, behavioral energy efficiency programs can reach the most customers at scale rapidly. But we also think we've been doing that at OPower for a long time and engaging with low to moderate income customers through all those types of programs that I just gave an overview of. But we also think that it's important to identify and target explicitly those customers, make sure that utilities know who their low to moderate income customers are and help them engage in the opportunities and programs that utilities have, both energy efficiency programs and energy affordability programs, but as well as programs to help if those customers are in arrears or have the potential to end up in that situation, making sure that they know the programs that are available to them. And so we think about that as through these 4 different things here. So enrolling customers in those energy affordability programs, delivering bill savings to them, connecting them to energy efficiency programs that can help make their homes more comfortable, healthy for them as well. Also making those customers feel like the utility is on their side as well, and helping them with energy affordability so we can help drive satisfaction. And then of course, and I think this has been a huge one the past couple of years with the pandemic, as more customers are experiencing arrearages, is helping lower those costs and get them into arrearage management programs, help them manage that process. And so again, really centering things around equity and energy affordability, and that scaling up into all those different decarbonization pillars is a huge focus for us right now, and really exciting to see some of the opportunities that are coming forward with that. So with that, not sure how we're doing on timing, but I will pause there for questions or comments from anyone.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Samantha. That was great. Before I worked for Canada, I actually worked in energy efficiency around behavior change. So a lot of what you're saying definitely resonated. So we will jump into questions. So there's a few in the question box, but I'll also say for anyone who doesn't know, you can plop a question in the Q&A box there, and I'll try to get to as many as I can before we have to wrap up. But make sure that none of your questions are statements disguised as questions, but I was looking through, it doesn't seem like that's the case. So let's jump in. Okay, so we have a question from Brian. It says, has there been any study of if and how much behavioral change impacts are reduced over time if they are not reinforced regularly?
It's a really great question. So I would say, so behavioral energy efficiency, we typically like to look at it with a 1-year measure life, like I said, and then having that reapplication over time. But there have been studies on looking at the persistence of behavior change. If you were to end the program after a year, a couple of years, and it varies. I think part of it depends on how long that program has been in place. If you've had a program in existence for 5-10 years and then it were to end then, I think you would see some of that persistence kind of stick around for a little bit because that program has had time to ramp. It's had constant interaction with those utility customers. I think if you see an instance where a utility were to run a behavior program for a couple of years and then be like, okay, we're not going to move forward with that anymore, I think that you would not see the same type of persistence. And it can be hard to measure that, and understanding persistence, I guess, can be tricky. There have been in the past instances where we've seen like multi-year measure life saying like, oh, behavior has like a 2 to 3 year measure life. And that's kind of like trying to identify what that level of persistence is. We've really been driving the market towards a 1-year measure life because it can be hard to really quantify exactly how much persistence there is if you don't continue the program and have that continual interaction. So, and I'm also happy I can pull some studies together too, and I'm happy to follow up with different resources if folks are interested in seeing those.
That's great. There was a comment in the chat asking if the report that you were presenting on was available to the public, and if you could share that. Yeah,
absolutely. Both are available, and we have some blogs about them too to help digest them easily as well. So I will include those in the follow-up with you as well to send out.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Samantha. Okay, another popular question here is, what are some educational tools to learn and spread what the most impactful behaviors are to maximize energy efficiency?
I would say one thing that we've been doing recently, we always love when utilities want to try new things with us or be innovative around some of the behavioral solutions that we have. One thing that we've been seeing is really driving more participation and energy savings is actually using video within home energy reports, and then also within education tools such as like heat pumps. And so we've done that with a utility on both fronts, like doing a end of year review, like, okay, this is what your past year looked like, this is how much energy you used, using that normative comparison in there as well to how you compare to your neighbors, and then looking at the year ahead to try and identify maybe any potential patterns there. And because people tend to just retain more with video, and seeing those numbers in a fun way in front of them can have more of an influence. And I think the heat pump education campaign with video is also really interactive. That showed, how will this look in your house? How does it make you more comfortable? Has no noise, things like that. So those additional details that are beyond just like, oh, you'll save energy. It is, more sustainable to go in this direction, is like touching on those other reasons someone might want to electrify. And then I think also pulling in the weatherization piece, that's like, oh, like if you weatherize your home and then adopt a heat pump, like all things will be great. But I think video is something that has been new for us and really fun to explore with clients.
That's great. Thanks, great question, Daniela. We have another question here from Martin. It says, does your analysis include consideration of all scopes of GHG emissions, including utilities and embodied emissions? If so, how comprehensive is that analysis?
We know which report that's referring to.
Ooh, not sure.
That's something. So I know, at least off the top of my head, for the Brattle Group, in the report, you'll see the breakdown of like how they use marginal emissions data in that one, and they have their own proprietary modeling system that was used. So I think if it's referring to that one, I'm happy to take that question. Each one will be different. Each report, the answer for that will be different, and happy to share that afterwards. I think I have to go back and double check with both of them to make sure that I'm explaining that detail correctly, but that's a great question.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, we have a question here from Sherry. It says, empowering customers to make better choices also puts more pressure on a society that is experiencing decision fatigue. Are we reducing the number of decisions homeowners need to make if they want to choose more energy efficient practices, but do not have the capacity to engage in these programs?
It's a really great question. And I think that's where some like the artificial intelligence piece, it comes into play. So we're trying to learn about our customers as they engage with either with their home energy reports and any other engagement tools that we might have in play with that utility. Sometimes some of the things that we'll do with our home energy report is we'll put like a one-click kind of like question on it. It's like, oh, like, do you rent? You know, like, are you like these little tidbits that we try to get them to just like, oh, like yes, no, but they don't have to go like sign in anywhere to like answer that. It's just like a one-click question, and then there's it won't follow up on it, and then they'll have that data, and then the next time, you know, use that to like present to them, oh, you know, for renters versus the homeowner, obviously the options of programs that they can engage in is different. So we try to take what we know about the customer and present things in front of them that we think they would be most interested in, or will present the most cost savings to them. And when there is advanced metering infrastructure in play, and we have that more granular data about usage and can do disaggregation to really understand what in their home might be using more energy or might be at the time where it's nearing the end of its useful life, we can present that to the customer and help them make that decision. So I think it's really important, right? I mean, that there's so many options in the market just in general, right? Of what we can buy, what we can do, programs we can participate in. And so helping customers identify what might be right for them is definitely important. And I think too, I'll just add a note on that, on the solution that we're working on for low to moderate income customers is helping them kind of like pre-qualify in a way, if you will, what types of programs they can participate in, making sure that they're aware of the ones in their state or province that are available to them, and making it more of a streamlined process for them to participate in those energy affordability programs, energy efficiency, arrearage management, just trying to pull it all together too into one common place for them, I think is very helpful in those types of situations as well.
Great point. Yeah, it's one thing like making sure everybody actually knows what's available to them, and then also starting where they're at, right? So not overwhelming. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, gotta meet the customer where they are. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay, I think we have time for one more, but Samantha also said that she'd share her contact info. So if we didn't get to your question, her email is there, so you can feel free to reach out. And she'll also be sharing some resources with us afterwards. So last question is from Christina, and the question is, how do you recommend reaching buildings that are tenant occupied? Since tenants typically pay utilities, these building owners can be challenging to engage with upgrades and incentives.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And part of it for us is we try to help utilities identify who their renters are. And that's, like I said, like adding that like one question into a home energy report. It's like, do you rent or do you own? Also having that included in any like home energy analysis, like online home energy assessments as well, trying to gather that data so that the utility knows, first of all, what types of programs can they participate in as a renter, but then they also know, okay, we have these people in this building, and then working on that landlord facility management engagement as well is definitely a challenge. Something we're thinking about more, seeing like, is there a way to use behavior in that? And I will say there's a really cool or like unique example of this in New York. And this actually comes from my work previous to OPower, is that they have a kind of like a trifold pamphlet that's it's a renter's guide. So if you're out, you're looking at apartments or whatnot, trying to figure out where you want to live, it gives you like a checklist of all the things to look for as a renter and the questions to ask about energy within that home. Because typically it's not always the first thing that we think about renting or buying, right? It tends to be an emotional piece there. You're looking at, can I afford rent? Can I afford a mortgage? And typically energy costs don't come to the forefront of that. We don't think about that at that time. And so there's New York, a utility in New York created this trifold, and on it, it's like, okay, like give this to your landlord and they can engage in our energy efficiency programs and whatnot, trying to initiate that from the renter side to the landlord, which can still be challenging, right? Like they may be responsive to that, they may not. So I think it's definitely an important piece of addressing that split incentive and learning, like, is there a way to use behavior to drive that forward? Is it going into conversations with the tenant? That's one way to do it. That's how we have, right, direct access through the behavioral programs is to the customer themselves. But I do think on the other side, it's still important to, have programs that are directed directly towards that landlord or property manager as well. So kind of having a balance of both. I don't know if that really answers the question well or not, but I feel like we could talk about that for days.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us today, Samantha. I know I learned a lot, and it looks like there's a lot of great questions here that I apologize for not getting to, but feel free to reach out to Samantha. And if you don't know, next week we have another session coming up around reaching income qualified Ontarians. So you can join Luke and Sasha next week, same time. Otherwise, please enjoy the rest of your day and have a fantastic weekend. Until next time. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.